I see, obviously, you're talented. Not that you're talented, but I see your talent, but you're also talented. You know, the pocket is always an interesting thing. I think that a good pocket is a good pocket, no matter what type of pocket it is. But I think they all share similar things, like the turnarounds, the grace notes, the pulsation, and the rhythm, as well as the, I don't know if this is a proper word to use, but as well as the quiet spots. And I do understand the fact that you say that realistically, everybody has a position in the ensemble. But as a bass player, are you, okay, obviously you hear everything, the melodies, the chord changes, but are you really in the, is your ear locked specifically or more percentually with the drummer as opposed to anything else that's happening? Or are you at a point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a percentage there. I mean, I could break it down like that. The majority of who I'm paying attention to when I'm playing is the drummer. Absolutely, no question about it. I'm with that drummer and we are like one, and that's where that pocket comes from. And our mission in life is together to keep that pocket and make it happen. And sometimes when I'm grooving with the drummer, sometimes he's leading and I'm doing the following. Sometimes I'm doing the leading and he's doing the following. And sometimes we're just going right down there together. But usually someone is taking the lead. You know, it's kind of like in race cars, you know what I'm saying? You know, sometimes two guys that are on a team, they'll draft each other, you know? And I think that a rhythm section has all different kind of nuances like that occur. But primarily when I'm on stage, the first thing I do is I get with that drummer and I make sure that I'm connecting with that drummer.
But Andy, are you, I mean, I understand that the drum has, you know, the hi-hat, the kick, the toms, the snare and everything. Are you more formatted around the kick, or is it everything?
Everything. Yeah, I don't really, well, no, actually, come to think of it, putting a little thought into it, I'm about the backbeat. Actually, I listen to that 2 and 4. I mean, my favorite drummers that I love the most give me that 2 and the 4, and when they give it to me, they really give it to me. One, crack, 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 and that's kind of where I'm at. Because what I do, I was talking about earlier, I have an internal kind of body clock, you know, that I'm hearing my time, you know, the time, trying to lock in to where I'm feeling it, where it's at. And I'm counting 16th notes. Digga, 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 digga. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But I'm thinking digga, 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 digga. So I'm singing. So I'm hearing and I'm thinking 16th notes all the time. That's why if it's a drum beat that's like doom cut, doom cut, doom cut, doom cut, I'm hearing doom cut, doom cut, doom cut, and I'm putting a bounce on it. Doom cut, doom cut, doom cut, but I'm hearing it bouncing. You know, I just hear that little bounce in there and swing it a little bit, you know? You know, unless it's if it's straight, it's straight. That's where it's at. But for all that funk stuff and all that greasy stuff, I'm hearing them bouncing. Da-ding, da-ding, ding, ding, da-ding, 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 cut, ding, cut. Ding, da ding, da ding, 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 da ding, da ding, da ding. It comes from New Orleans, I think. That's where the funk is for me. That's where I'm feeling it. So I hope that, does that help a little bit?
No, I mean, it helped a whole lot, but you know, I also think that I heard it in a different way. You're actually playing the 4/4, but you're using a 16th note fill, which gives it even more of a groove.
Could be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. That's the way I think of it, you know? Yeah.
And just one other question, please, if you don't mind. Your soloing is really nice.
Thank you.
What is your development process, or what development process did you go through for soloing?
It sounds harder than it is in terms of the sophistication of it. I can tell you that. I'm not a jazz musician and a trained, I don't have a lot of music theory skills or jazz improvisation skills. I tend to play over simple harmony, just a couple of chords. I'm a funk musician, and I use basic scale forms. I use that blues scale. I use that one, or the minor pentatonic. Or the minor scale. You know, so I'll use scales, and I'll just kind of connect them together in ways that work for me, you know. And I try and create, if there's something I'm thinking about when I'm soloing, I'm thinking about the emotional content of it more than the notes. I don't get hung up on notes. You know, maybe I should get more hung up on it, but I don't. I just think of it in terms of what I'm looking for emotionally, like tension and release, you know, something that's going to be, you know, that's going to be kind of like a little bit dark and sinister sounding, right? Now, if I'm looking for something happy and joyous, switch to a major tonality. If I'm looking for something that's real stern and kind of stern, you know, something that's kind of got a little snarl to it, you know, or a little anger to it, I might play a diminished scale, a half step below tonic or above it, and then back to my tonic. Another one I might use is the whole tone scale. You know, the whole tone scale is one of those ambiguous ones because it don't sound necessarily minor or major. It sounds somewhere in between. It's like a question without an answer, you know? It's a vague deal in terms of sound. Whereas kind of a definitive tonality, but then you put in, you know, it's like an unanswered question. So I think of it in terms of that. If I'm looking for something that takes me when I'm soloing, or if I'm looking for something that might take me to some faraway land, I might start playing some of this kind of like, you know, gives it that Indian from India kind of a vibe. Or the harmonic minor. That starts to make it sound like classical music. Back to the happy major. And then I'll use chromatic passages where I'm playing a lot of passing tones. Building tension and then releasing back to the tonic. These are just some of the things that I'll do, you know, scales usually, you know, and then I just try and connect them in my own kind of way. But the main thing I'm thinking about is not the notes. That's not the main thing I'm thinking about. What I'm trying to think about is sticking the rhythm and keeping the tone of the instrument. If there was a priority list, when I was soloing, what's the number one priority? Is stick that rhythm, stick that landing. You know, like when, say you're watching the Olympics, okay? And you're watching the gymnastics, okay? and they go running down that mat, and then they run, bounce off that one thing and jump off that other thing, and they go spinning through the air, and they either land and it's dead perfect, or they fall on their butt. You know what I'm saying? If they land and it's dead perfect, it counts. But if you fall down, it don't count at all. So you're out. You're out of there. So game over, you know what I'm saying? So that's the way I think of it in terms of rhythm. If I can't stick that rhythm, you know, if I do that big crazy, if I don't land that, it's all for nothing. You know what I mean? It didn't mean nothing because I didn't stick the landing. So the rhythm is my #1 priority. And then my next priority is to keep the instrument speaking in a voice that's pleasant to listen to. Meaning, you know, I don't want to use too much aggressive technique to where it starts to sound, you know, where it starts to sound rotten. You know what I mean? So that's my #2 priority. And then my 3rd priority is my note choices. You know, then comes the notes. But the rhythm and the tone is far more important to me. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, like, what was your feeling about? You mentioned Paul McCartney of the Beatles. He played a smaller bass. He played a Hohner, acoustic bass, I believe.
Hofner.
Or was it a Hofner? Okay.
Yes, sir.
What do you think that? Do you think that probably added, like, how much did that kind of change their sound? You think, as far as, because I noticed, like, later on they went to like he went to a Rickenbacker, I think, when they went into the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band. But before that, I think he was always using that Hofner, I guess.
Yes, he was.
So what do you think that kind of,
Absolutely.
that was probably more of a mellow effect, maybe, or you know?
Well, it has to do with the sign of the times, because during those times, first of all, the round wound strings weren't even invented then, okay? So all you had was flat wound strings, which are the types of strings that are used on an upright bass. So they didn't have the brightness. They sounded like that sound that I was doing earlier. Even more. Those are Paul line. So he had round wound strings, and he had a hollow body instrument, and it was a short scale instrument, and that sound was kind of an electric version of the upright bass. That's where they were in the journey of electric bass. Bass guitar is not that old of a thing in the scheme of things, you know, come around the early 1950 or something. So it's not that old of an instrument, the electric bass guitar, and you know, the ones that he was playing were from the early 60s. So the Hofner violin basses that he was playing, and he was playing them with round wound or with flat wound strings, and so was everybody else at the time. So all those old school recordings, all the Motown, a lot of the Motown recordings, and all that stuff from the 50s, all that rock and roll, and all that, all the basses, that is that sound. Shake, rattle, and roll, baby. And it's like that's the tone that they were getting back then. Then along comes the round wound strings, and the sound of the electric bass started to change, you know. And people started getting into that, particularly in the '70s with slapping the bass. And John Entwistle was a main innovator of round wound strings because he wanted to hear it. He wanted it to sound like a. He wanted it to sound like a piano. So I think it was Rotosound and him created the round on strings, but I'm not positive of that.
I know that one riff from the Day Tripper was that was definitely kind of.
Oh, there's millions of them that are incredible. Oh man, well they're really heavily influenced by the blues, and the thing about Paul McCartney, I mean, talking about Paul McCartney, is that he was fundamental and he was meat and potatoes, but he was a lot of other things too. He's very melodic.
Yeah.
And he got really involved in the melody, and he used a lot of
Other chords. Right?
yeah, other notes that he had note choices that were very melodic and stuff.
Nobody had probably done that.
No, he was definitely a very profound. Making bold moves, bold strides. He's making big strides with the bass guitar. Do you have one more?
Yeah, Andy, when you go in to do session work, right, I guess it's set up where you're tracking bass. Is there a particular tone that you set, or do you go flat? And the engineer actually, when you go into the mixing process...
I always start flat.
Start flat.
I always go, and the question was, when I go into the recording studio, do I have a specific tone that I start with? And the answer is I like flat. I like the EQ to be completely flat on my bass, and I go to tape. I always go to tape, or even if it's digital nowadays, which pretty much everything is. I go in flat, and oftentimes if the instrument is a good quality sounding instrument and it sounds good like this, when it's not even plugged in, it'll sound great flat. And there'll be plenty of every frequency there, and there'll be even distribution of sonic space with the frequencies, meaning there'll be just as much low end as there is low mids, as there is mids, as there is high mids, and as there is highs. You want an even amount of each. You don't want crushing lows and crushing highs. That's called the hype. Certain styles of music will call for that, but when it comes time to mix it, you can hype it then. But when it comes to tracking, always flat.
So, do you turn up everything on the bass, Andy? Like the mids, the highs, and the lows, do you bring them all the way up?
No, I leave them completely flat. I don't turn them on at all.
Center them, okay. But here's something that I want to ask you, Andy. I understand the flat process, but is there any hertz that you set 500 hertz on the EQ or anything, or you just go, everything's flat?
No, there is, it just depends, because depending on the environment, the way that sound, the physics of sound is, the way that I'm hearing it, you see, depending on how the bass sounds in that particular room, I might notch it. I might use a notch. Like on my preamp, it comes down to my rig. I use a Jonas Hellborg preamp. And it has notches. It has these, on the low mids and on the high mids, it has 3 different notches that are your main notch for your low mids and your high mids, and then you have a cut and boost of that particular range of the thing. So what I'm hearing, it depends on what I'm hearing, the way that the environment is. It depends on how far away from the monitors I am, how big the mixing room is, or the control room is, and stuff like that. But for the most part, I start flat. And if it just sounds, weird to me or something like that, I might click, 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 click. I might fiddle with those notches a little bit. I can't tell you if there's one specific setting that I use all the time. No, it just depends on the environment. But for the most part, everything's flat going to tape. Always. And I leave a lot of room in there. I don't stay on the hot side of the needle, meaning I don't get up in the hot side of the up in here. Yeah, I don't get up in there. I keep it down in here, so I leave some room for my hand, because you gotta compress it a little bit, right, to keep it smooth and everything. But I try and do it with technique, so they don't take my dynamic range away, because that drives me nuts. When I'll be playing. Hang on one second. I like my notes to be loud when I want them to be loud, and I like them to be soft when I want them to be soft. You get into too much compression, and it's normalizing everything, and it's taking away my ability to have personality and emotion in my playing. So what I try and do is always just be even with my right hand, because you know, if I'm all over the place, then it's gonna, if my dynamics are going up and down in all kinds of weird random places and stuff that don't fit with the music, the track ain't gonna groove right, it ain't gonna sound right. So I try and do it with technique first, and then in the event that I'm looking for, that I need compression or something, then we add the compression. But if I can get the part right, I can get it dead even, volume-wise. And if I can get it even like that and it's going to tape good, then we don't need to hammer it down with no compression or nothing like that. You know, compression can be used as an effect too, you know, if you want that sound, if you're going for some hard edge music and stuff. But I think it's time that, has everybody got a ticket now? Not yet. Okay, we're still working on getting the tickets out so we can do some giving away.
We have snacks, water, soda, if anyone would like some, we have them back here.
Yeah, go back and grab some if you feel like it, fella. Yeah, everybody. And in a few minutes, as soon as everybody has their tickets, I'm gonna give away a bass and an amp.
Word up.